You are holding a newborn. It cannot walk, it cannot feed itself, it cannot regulate its own body temperature. It cannot even lift its own head for the first month of its life. And around you, there are no hospitals, no formula, no pediatricians, no baby monitors, no cribs, no heated rooms. Just the open world, wild animals, changing weather, and the tiny human being whose survival depends entirely on what the people around it are willing to do. For roughly 300,000 years, this was the situation every single human parent faced. And yet, here you are. That fact alone is extraordinary because infant mortality across the ancient world was brutal by any modern measure. But ancient human communities were not helpless. They were not stumbling blindly through parenthood. They had developed a system, a deeply sophisticated, biologically embedded, culturally reinforced system for keeping children alive. And when you understand what that system actually looked like, you start to realize how radically different it was from almost everything modern parenting tells you to do. Let us start with the first problem any infant faces: warmth. A newborn cannot shiver. That reflex does not develop properly until several weeks after birth. A newborn also has almost no body fat to insulate itself. In an environment without central heating or synthetic fabric, exposure to cold air for even a short period could kill a baby. So what did ancient humans do? They never put the baby down. This sounds like an exaggeration. It is not. Across dozens of hunter-gatherer societies studied in the 20th century, from the Kung San of the Kalahari Desert to the Hadza of Tanzania to indigenous groups across the Amazon, researchers found that infants were held or carried almost continuously, sometimes as much as 22 to 24 hours a day during the first months of life. Not because the parents were overprotective, because the baby's life literally depended on contact with a warm body. Anthropologist Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy, whose 2009 book Mothers and Others fundamentally changed how scientists think about human child rearing, described this as a biologically normal baseline for our species. Human infants are not designed to be placed alone in a crib. They are designed to be carried, pressed against skin, lulled by the rhythm of a moving body. When they are separated from that contact, their cortisol levels, the stress hormone your body releases when something is wrong, spike. Their heart rate becomes irregular. Their core temperature drops. The distress cry of an infant, Hrdy argues, is not manipulation. It is a survival signal that evolved over millions of years because separation meant danger. Ancient communities understood this intuitively, even if they had no word for cortisol. So the first tool they used to keep children alive was not a tool at all. It was other people. Here is where the story gets interesting. For most of human evolutionary history, raising a child was not something a mother did alone. It wasn't even something two parents did as a pair. It was a communal project. In anthropology, this is called alloparenting, from the Greek allos meaning other. An alloparent is any individual other than the biological mother who provides direct care or resources to an infant or child. Grandmothers, aunts, older sisters, older brothers, unrelated adults in the same band. Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy's research showed that human infants are uniquely designed, compared to our great ape relatives, to attract the attention and care of multiple adult caregivers. Human babies make eye contact almost from birth. They smile early. They are socially responsive in ways that chimpanzee infants are not. Hrdy argues this is not accidental. Human infants evolved to be appealing to a wide circle of caregivers, because in the ancestral environment, the more adults who were emotionally invested in a baby's survival, the better its chances of making it through the first brutal years. The grandmother in particular turned out to be one of the most important figures in early human-child survival. Kristen Hawkes, an anthropologist at the University of Utah, spent years studying the Hadza people of Tanzania and developed what became known as the grandmother hypothesis. The idea that the unusual longevity of human females beyond their reproductive years evolved specifically because grandmothers provided food and childcare that dramatically increased the survival rates of their grandchildren. In most animal species, females do not live significantly beyond the end of their reproductive years. In humans, they do. And the data Hawkes collected showed why. Grandmothers foraged more calories per hour than mothers with young children, and they transferred much of that food directly to grandchildren. They were caloric engines for child survival. Take a moment to picture what this actually looked like on a given day. It is dawn. The light is just turning orange across the savannah. A mother is nursing a 1-year-old at the edge of a sleeping group, a band of perhaps 20 to 30 individuals who have been moving across this landscape together for years. The baby has been pressed against her body all night. An older woman, her mother or the grandmother of the infant, is already stirring, picking up a digging stick, preparing to forage before the heat of the day sets in. A girl of perhaps 8 or 9 years old, too young to forage alone, crouches near the mother and reaches out to touch the baby's foot. The baby turns its head towards her. She smiles. She is already learning to be an alloparent. She already has a stake in this child's survival. The infant will be passed between arms today. It will nurse several times. It will be held by at least 3 or 4 different people before the sun goes down. This was the system. Now let's talk about the second enormous threat to ancient children: nutrition. Breast milk is not permanent. A mother's milk supply depends on her own nutritional status. A mother who is underfed produces less milk. And in lean seasons, drought, failed hunting, long migrations, ancient human mothers were frequently underfed. What happened then? The first solution was extended breastfeeding. In modern industrialized societies, breastfeeding typically ends between 6 and 12 months. In most traditional and foraging societies studied by anthropologists, it continues for 2 to 4 years. James Sussman, an anthropologist who spent decades living among the Juansi Bushmen of the Kalahari and wrote about it in Affluence Without Abundance, observed that children were breastfed well into their 3rd and 4th year. Extended nursing provided not just calories, but immune protection. Breast milk contains antibodies, enzymes, and living cells that protect infants from infection in environments without sanitation or medicine. Extended nursing also acted as a form of natural birth spacing. The hormonal suppression of ovulation during frequent nursing meant that births in hunter-gatherer communities were typically spaced 3 to 4 years apart. This was not planned, it was biology, and it mattered enormously for child survival because children born too close together competed for the same limited maternal resources. The second nutritional solution was one that sounds alarming to modern ears: pre-mastication. This is the practice of a caregiver chewing food and then transferring it directly into the infant's mouth. It is documented across cultures on every inhabited continent. And before you recoil from it, consider what it actually accomplished. It turned foods that a toothless infant could not eat, tubers, dried meat, seeds, into soft, pre-digested paste that could provide real calories. It also transferred saliva, which contains enzymes that begin the digestion process, and some researchers believe may help infants develop microbiome diversity, the complex community of bacteria in the gut that plays a critical role in immune development. Pre-mastication was not a failure of hygiene. It was a feeding technology, the only one available, and it was often performed by alloparents, not just mothers, by grandmothers, aunts, older siblings. Everyone in the band had a role. Now here's the counterintuitive twist that changes everything. Modern parents are frequently told to follow a set of practices that, measured against a 300,000-year baseline of human parenting, are almost completely reversed. Infants are placed alone in cribs in separate rooms. Feeding is timed rather than on demand. Independence is treated as a developmental goal to be achieved as early as possible. Sleep training encourages infants to self-soothe in isolation. James McKenna, an anthropologist and sleep researcher at the University of Notre Dame, and the director of the Mother-Baby Behavioral Sleep Laboratory, spent decades studying how human infants actually sleep in physiological terms. His research found that when a breastfeeding mother and infant sleep in close proximity, what he calls the breast sleep environment, their sleep cycles synchronize. The mother's breathing, body heat, and movement provide ongoing sensory cues that regulate the infant's breathing, arousal, and temperature through the night. In populations where this kind of close sleep contact is the norm, rates of sudden infant death are significantly lower than in populations where infants sleep alone and isolated. McKenna is not arguing that every modern family should co-sleep in every context. He is pointing out that the human infant's nervous system was calibrated over millions of years of evolution to expect close physical contact with a caregiver at night, and that many of our modern struggles, colic, feeding difficulties, inconsolable crying, may in part be the sound of a body searching for something it evolved to need and cannot find. The ancient world also invested in children in ways that go beyond survival mechanics. At the Sungir burial site in Russia, dated to approximately 34,000 years ago, archaeologists uncovered the graves of two children, a boy and a girl, buried with extraordinary care. The graves contained more than 10,000 mammoth ivory beads, fox teeth, carved ivory animals, and multiple spears and lances. The quantity of labor represented by those grave goods was enormous. These were not children who died and were discarded. They were children whose communities spent thousands of hours creating objects to honor them in death. This tells us something important. Ancient humans did not merely keep children alive as a biological imperative. They loved them. They mourned them. They built meaning around them. The capacity for that emotional investment, the way a baby's face locks your attention, the way its cry activates something ancient and urgent in your nervous system, is not a product of modern civilization. It is the product of millions of years in evolution in which the adults who cared most deeply for their children left the most descendants. You are one of those descendants. Every instant you feel when you hear a baby cry, every pull toward closeness, every fierce and sometimes irrational protectiveness, that is the ancient system still running in you. Not as a relic, as a survival tool that worked. You are holding a newborn. It cannot walk, it cannot feed itself, it cannot regulate its own body temperature. But unlike every other creature on this planet, it does not have to do any of that alone. It was born into a web of care that evolution spent hundreds of thousands of years building. And that web, that ancient, messy, communal, deeply human web, is the real reason you are here.